See that lone pine up on that hill over there? What are we actually doing right now? The kids are just wild out there. They're wild. But they're having a good time, you know? They're having a good time. This is Untamed, Unbroken, The Adventurer's Guide, and I'm your host, Blake Bredesen. Welcome back to Untamed, Unbroken, and today we got a good one. It is fall, after all. I love camping, so we're going to talk about fall camping in the Midwest specifically. We're going to talk about essential gear, sleeping, clothing, a little bit on cooking, tips for setting up camp, things you can enjoy, any safety considerations maybe. We'll talk about some favorite camp spots of mine and ones that have been recommended. And we'll go through a packing list, just a sample packing list. As always, I have linked below my personal packing list. It's all encompassing for the most part. Obviously, you can't get everything in there, but definitely gives you a good start. That link is in the description there. First, why fall camping? Obviously, Midwest, the fall foliage. It's beautiful. The cooler temperatures, it's crisp. It's perfect for hiking. It's perfect for the outdoors. You can still get a sweat, but you don't have that summer heat just baking you the whole time. A lot of times, some of those popular campsites, camping areas are less crowded unless you are in places like the North Shore of Minnesota, where at least through September, maybe even the first week of October, can stay pretty busy up there. But in general, fewer crowds, especially in places like the Boundary Waters, Shawnee National Forest, less crowded, maybe a more peaceful experience for you. And that's what I love about the fall camping is there's less people. Less people are going to deal with the colder nights that are getting down into, for sure, the 40s, unless you're September again, but October in general, 40s at night, some into the 30s now. Highs are 40s, 50s, 60s, depending on the week in the fall, but it's definitely my favorite time of year to get outside and to go camping. Let's go through just a few quick tips. Number one, check the weather. It can get unpredictable in the fall, especially in the later the fall you get, October and November. So check that forecast before you leave and just be ready for any of those changes. Rain, early snow, especially in the northern Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, UP, and Michigan. You want to be ready for that early snow, even ice starting to form. If you're in the Boundary Waters, October, if it gets cold enough at night, you could have a thin layer of ice on the water that then melts later in the day. Be ready for it. Number two, you want to arrive early, shorter days. Best time to set up camp, get dinner ready kind of before it's dark. Especially if you're in a dense forest area, maybe you're wild camping. It can get dark rather quickly, or at least, it does get dark. Sun maybe not be down, but it's definitely getting dark. Don't forget to layer up, dress in layers, stay warm. That moisture wicking base layer, insulating layers like fleece or down, finishing with that waterproof outer layer. It's going to help you in any fluctuating temperatures, especially in the fall where it's sometimes 30 or 40 degrees when you wake up, and then it's 50 to 60 sometimes in the afternoon. Number four, stay dry. Bring a rain fly for your tent, bring a tarp. Wet gear, wet clothing can ruin a trip pretty quick. And in the fall, it's not going to dry out nearly as quick. So you're going to have to rely on the sun if it's out, or you have to rely on fire to dry things out. Because you can't just hang it like you can in the summertime and it just dries out because the air temp's so warm. Number 5, warm sleeping gear. Typically rated for lower temperatures. I like a 15-degree bag in the fall at minimum. That gets you kind of a comfort rating of about 30 degrees. Remember, with sleeping bags, that degree that they're saying it's rated for is typically the extreme temperature. So typically a 0-degree bag is rated for 0 degrees in extreme circumstances. Like that's the extreme low. But the comfort rating for a 0-degree bag is 15 to 20 degrees. Don't forget lighting, headlamps, flashlights. It's darker in the morning, gets darker earlier at night. String lights, lanterns, if you're at a campground, something like that. Think about fire. Sometimes at a campground or something, if it's been really dry lately, they might have typically campgrounds don't really have a fire ban, but if there is a fire ban, maybe you are dispersed camping or you're camping in a national forest and you're just off of a DNR road of some sort, but there's fire ban, you could do a propane fire pit. Something to think about there. All right. Let's get into the essential gear for fall camping. A tent, a 3-season tent with a good rain fly, a footprint. That's the best overall. So a tent with good ventilation reduces the condensation inside. That's my favorite way to do it. Some people like to hammock camp. So they got their hammock set up, an underquill for insulation, and then maybe they're in a sleeping bag as well with some sort of rain fly over them or a tarp over them to protect them from the rain. That's an option. Sleeping gear. We talked about the sleeping bag. Ideally, 15-degree bags. They're going to keep you warm on those chillier nights, but you want to combo that with an insulated sleeping pad with an R value of 3 or more. I would prefer a 4, 5, or 6 R value in the fall when it's getting down to 30. Can you get by with something that's a 3? Yes, you can. I've done that before. Totally fine. But think about like those self-inflating ones or closed cell foam pads. Those can be good options depending on what type of trip you're doing, how light you want to be. Additional warmth, I would consider doing like a sleeping bag liner, like a nice micro fleece, thin bag liner. That can add a few degrees to your sleeping bag, a little extra warmth. If you're car camping or something like that at a campground, just bring some blankets. I mean, my daughter and I are planning a trip at the end of October up in Door County, and that's all I plan on doing is I'm going to lay some blankets on our tent. We're going to a campground at a state park. I'm just going to lay blankets on the floor of our tent. We'll put our sleeping bags on top of, or sleeping pads on top of those. And then we'll have our sleeping bags. And then my daughter always has some extra fleece blankets that she likes to cuddle with. And I'll have an extra one for myself as well. So, plus we're both in 15-degree bags. Like hers is really nice and warm, and mine's okay. So, good to go there. Clothing. I've talked about clothing and base layers and insulating layers 100 times, I feel like. But moisture wicking, no cotton. Moisture wicking base layers, either merino wool or synthetic materials. When talking about insulating layers, fleece or a down jacket, something like that, that's going to provide some warmth. And then an outer layer, have on hand, waterproof, windproof. It's going to protect you against the rain and the wind. So I always have that with. Accessories, we're thinking warm hats, gloves, some wool socks, thin merino wool gloves are my go-to. That I get on an app called CamoFire. Actually, in the fall is the time to buy them. Then we have cooking equipment, stove, if you want portable camp stove, those fuel canisters, propane canisters, whatever you're doing, isopropane, something reliable that you're gonna cook with. Maybe you're planning on cooking over the fire. Bring that stuff, bring that gear. Cookware, lightweight pots, pans, utensils, mugs. Don't forget mugs, hot beverages. Think hot chocolate if you have kids. And then food storage. I mean, this goes without saying, right? Bear-proof containers if you can. Hang your bags if you can. Keep your food locked in the car if you're camping or in the camper. Whatever you do, don't have a bunch of food in your tent wherever you're camping. Even if you are in a campground, don't have a bunch of food in your tent. Keep it out of your sleeping area. Lighting, we talked briefly on this. Headlamps, flashlights. Make sure you bring some extra batteries. If you're at a campground, maybe some string lights. A bigger lantern is always nice to have. I like the lights that just clip on to the visor of my hat. Lightweight, easy. Navigation. Depending on where you're going, right? If you're going into a national forest or a wilderness area, a map and compass and GPS device, satellite communication device, all necessary. And you want to study that stuff beforehand. If you're just going to a campground, a quick map study, get a lay of the land, and then you can kind of do that in camp too. It's usually pretty laid back. If you're at a campground, in a state park, you likely have cell service, all of that. You probably have electricity nearby if your campsite doesn't have it. For instance, 2 weeks we're heading up to a state park. We are tent camping. I call this car camping. So we pull our car into our campsite, set up the tent, hang out, do all of our stuff there. No electricity though. So we got to pack in water. Well, they do have water there. Different stations, water stations. Depending on weather, they'll even have a shower. If it's staying warm enough, they might have running water and a running shower area. But otherwise, I'm just planning on packing in a 6-gallon jug of water, bring in some bottled water, keep the food super simple. I don't like to do a ton of cooking when I camp. Unless I'm in the Boundary Waters, then I don't mind. But when I'm with my kids, I don't like to do a ton of cooking. And if you have little kids, you understand why. And then first aid kit. You got to have a first aid kit. Make it as comprehensive as your pack will allow. So you can go super, super heavy duty, if you're just car camping. But the inverse of that, if you're just car camping, the likelihood of needing it is maybe just a little bit less because it's not like you're going deep into the wilderness, 10 miles, and super remote, where that first aid kit is something you may have to rely upon. Where car camping, cell service, you're not in the wilderness, you're a lot closer to the medical care that you might need, but you still want some stuff, especially some basic first aid stuff, treating those minor injuries. Tips for setting up camp. So, choosing your campsite wisely. Now, if you're picking one on a website for a campground, they have pictures. Just try to find one that looks good. But looking for dry, flat areas away from water sources might avoid some dampness. In the fall, you don't really have to worry too much in the Midwest about flooding. But consider wind directions. Use natural windbreaks, trees or rocks, especially if you're remote camping. That doesn't matter as much when you are at a campground, obviously. Set up as early as you can. You have shorter daylight hours. Get things set up as best you can before dark hits, just so you're not doing the stuff with a flashlight. And then stay organized. Keeping your gear organized, keeping it within reach. It's a lot easier to know where everything is when you're staying organized. If you have a gear loft, hanging organizers inside your tent, something to think about. Or just keeping things, if you're out in the wilderness, keeping things pretty organized in your pack or packs. Makes things a lot easier when things are organized in camp and you're not looking everywhere for something you might need. Keep warm. Use a ground cloth, an additional layer under your sleeping pad. Like I talked about, what I plan on doing is putting a blanket under, like kind of an outdoor type blanket underneath our sleeping pads when we go at the end of the month. And then one tip is to warm your sleeping bag up before bed with hot water in a water bottle. Throw that in there, throw a couple of them in there, get some hot water going and pour it in the bottle and throw it in your tent, throw it in your sleep. Make sure it's sealed up good so you're not getting it soaked. In the fall, it's one of the best times to be outside enjoying activities, hiking. The trails are quieter, the scenery is better. Think Superior Hiking Trail in Minnesota along the North Shore, the Ice Age Trail in Wisconsin, fishing. The cooler temperatures can improve fishing conditions. I talked about this. You have turnover that happens, and the fish are now throughout the depths of the lakes because of that turnover. So some good fishing opportunities, September, October. Kayaking, canoeing, obviously one of the best things to do in the fall. It's going for a canoe ride down a river, a little paddle, checking out some sloughs, swamps, lakes, whatever. Photography is always fun in the fall too. The colors, the leaves falling, the landscape, the early morning with some of that fog sometimes that is present, those evenings. Safety considerations, think about weather, keeping an eye on that. Think about wildlife precautions, storing your food, keep the campsite clean, don't bring food into your tent. Think fire safety, be smart here, guys. If there's a fire ban, don't be that guy. Use your propane stove, maybe a propane fire pit if your camping situation allows. Have some good first aid knowledge and have some navigational skills. Familiarize yourself with the area and the trails, carrying that map, compass, GPS, knowing how to use them, and doing a map study beforehand. So you're familiar with where you are on that map, where your camp is going to be, the route you're traveling, whatever it might be. Be familiar. Even if it is a state park, familiarize yourself with the campsite, where things are, exits, all that stuff. All right. Let's get to some of my favorite camping spots, plus some spots that have been recommended. And this is in the Midwest. So technically the Midwest is the Dakotas down to Nebraska and Kansas. We got Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. That's technically the Midwest. Now, I'm not super familiar with most of the Midwest. I am very familiar with Minnesota and Wisconsin and the UP. Number one on my list, obviously, favorite camping spot all time, but especially in the fall, Boundary Waters, canoe area, northern Minnesota. One that I haven't been but has been recommended, Shawnee National Forest in Illinois. A lot of scenic overlooks, very cool area. Number 3, this is on my to-do list in the near future, Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park in Michigan. That's in the UP. It's on the southern shore of Lake Superior. Beautiful area up there. Then you have the Ozarks down in Missouri. So another great spot, the Ice Age Trail in Wisconsin. Other great places, Wisconsin Dells is a favorite. Anywhere along the North Shore of Minnesota. There's up into Grand Marais, Ely, another great spot. Not even going into the Boundary Waters, but just camping around that area. Places along the Missouri River in the Dakotas, North and South Dakota. Think about those. And then Door County, Wisconsin, where I'm heading in a couple weeks. There's 4 state parks up there, a lot of campgrounds, really pretty area. So I will likely do an episode recounting that and how it went with my daughter, who's 5. And we'll see if she wants to stay one night. It's only like an hour from where we live now after we moved. So I'm thinking about doing one night with her and then bringing her home and then taking my 2-year-old son for it would be his first tent camping. Otherwise, we'll get that in the springtime for his first tent camping experience. So it should be good. I'm just doing one at a time. I want some one-on-one time with the kids. So that's why. And since we're not, my wife won't be there. It's just going to be me. It's like a Thursday night, Friday night, kind of middle of the week thing, taking off work. So looking forward to that. And we'll do a recap on that. Remember, campsite etiquette, leave no trace, be respectful, pick up your trash, respect others, share the space, Now let's go through that brief packing list for fall camping. Think about sleeping: tent with a rain-fine footprint, sleeping bag rated for the cold temperatures, an insulated sleeping pad, moisture-wicking base layers, your warm insulating layers like fleece and down, waterproof and windproof outer layers, warm hat, gloves, thick socks, portable camp stove and cookware, bear-proof storage containers, headlamp, flashlight, extra batteries, a first aid kit, map, compass, GPS device, fire starter, propane, fire pit, if you can. Be kind of sweet. Not really necessary. Camp chair, sit pad, multi-tool, or a knife, or both. Reusable water bottles, hydration system. I like the Katadyn Be Free water filter. Trash bags, biodegradable soap. That there is a quick verbal packing list for fall camping. In the link or in the description, I have a link to a more comprehensive packing list. And it has links to things that I like on Amazon and stuff like that. So there you have it. Enjoy your time out there. Be safe and stay wild. Thank you for sticking around. If you've enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating and review. Even one word, it helps a ton. Sincerely appreciate you guys. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the next one. Stay wild.
You've been listening to Untamed, Unbroken, a Lone Pine Adventures original podcast.